College, is that correct? Both in theater. So you know where he gets this voice that he projects to us. He then decided, or was called, I'm not sure, to do a ministry and work in Nicaragua with the poor. And that changed his whole life. He has a commitment to immigration and to poverty and justice that is carried forth to today. It set him on his ministry. He attended the Union Theological Seminary in New York. Afterwards, served in a number of churches and organizations. And through a course in Columbia, he met his wife, Celine. Right? Close.
Close.
What's wrong?
She was at Columbia. Our trip was through Appalachia.
Yes, but the point is she was in a course with you.
Yes.
Aha, see, got that part. That's how I met my wife, too, at the university. And they traveled through Appalachia, and that further strengthened his commitment to the poor. And as he says, he fell in love. Celine and he have two children, Beckett and Serafina. And what's fascinating to me is after serving in various positions, in the second year of COVID, he decided to bring his family to Berkeley. That's a major move. And it was in Berkeley that he actually interviewed with our PNC, and they fell in love with him as we have. I will say this to you, Drew. Thank you for your commitment to those in the poverty area and for justice and economic fairness. But more importantly, you bring something I haven't seen so much from the pulpit. You bring emotion. You actually show how you feel and where your heart is before us. And I want to thank you for that. It upbuilds us, gives us courage to actually let our emotions out as men. So, Drew, the podium is yours. You're not going to speak from there, I hope.
Thank you. Wow. Clay, you did your homework. Thank you. That's humbling beginning. Thanks so much. Can you folks hear me okay? Sorry, I was trying to. Okay, perfect.
How's that?
Good for me. Okay, we good? Is that better? There you go. Okay, I'm gonna move it just there. I want to start with singing. Can we start with singing? You all know the song, "We Shall Not Be Moved"? Don't make me look foolish up here singing by myself. Yeah, yeah, okay. If you can stand, you want to stand with me? We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waters. Oh, we shall not be moved. We're on the road to freedom. We shall not be moved. We're on the road to freedom. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waters. Oh, we shall not be moved. Thanks, y'all. So that song probably emerged as an African American spiritual among enslaved people in the early freedom movement. It draws, you may know, from Psalm 1, which says that the one who meditates day and night and delights in the law of the Lord shall be like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in season and whose leaves do not wither. I wanted to start with a little bit of singing because I think in this moment of solidarity and resistance, I think our culture is discovering again what the church has known perhaps across the years about the power of singing. There are these singing resistance choirs that are springing up all over the East Bay, all around the country. This particular song was enormously important in the labor movement in the 1930s and 40s. It was sung by coal miners and textile workers and auto workers and farmers. And then enormously important again in the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. In 1962, when SNCC was organizing around voting rights for black people in the South, Field Secretary Phyllis Martin said, "The fear down here is tremendous. I didn't know whether I would be shot at or stoned or what, but when the singing started, I forgot all that. I felt good within myself. We sang, 'Oh, freedom, and we shall not be moved.' And after that, you just don't want to sit around anymore. You want the world to hear you, to know what you're fighting for." And then out here on the West Coast, as United Farm Workers were striking against grape growers in Delano, California? Delano, thank you, helping this New Yorker. But Dolores Huerta recalls, "We sang the Spanish version, 'No nos moverán,' every day, because we were on those picket lines from early morning until late in the evening, and we had to keep our spirits up on the picket lines. And one way that we kept our spirits up was to sing these songs. 'No nos moverán' symbolized the spirit that we had and that we needed to maintain, to keep people strong and let them know that eventually we were going to win as long as we don't give up." And then standing, as a very small part in that really long tradition, last December when I was with 43 other faith leaders chained to the front doors of ICE headquarters in San Francisco, ending operations there for one day, we sang this song over and over again. And I had that experience of the fear sort of leaving my body. It's a song about being rooted in God's love and justice and power and presence, being sort of stubbornly immovable in the face of hatred and cruelty and violence and oppression, unmoved by fear. So the lasting importance of this song, power of this song, I would say is not up for debate. But I will say, in this moment in the life of our nation, and kind of my own journey as it, parallels all of that. Whenever I hear this song, I keep hearing these two truths colliding. That on the one hand, if ever there was a time for standing our ground, this feels like it. But on the other hand, that if ever there's a time that we really need to be moved, to allow ourselves to be moved, this is also it. And sometimes I find myself sort of stuck in the middle, neither moving in the ways that I want to be moved, nor standing my ground in the ways that I want to be standing my ground. And so, in my sermon on Sunday, for those of you who heard it, I tried to grapple with these three stories about Jesus where he breaks down in tears and cries, and how this too seems to be like part of the Spirit. This idea that part of how Jesus embodies the presence and power of God and becomes the way for the people is by feeling deeply, by being moved. So now a little bit of personal. The Christian men who populated my early childhood had it all figured out. They were somewhat distant, impossibly pious exemplars whom you could scarcely approach, or that's how it felt to me anyway. They were smart and highly educated. They seemed to have all the answers, always knew what to say in every situation. Their faith seemed absolute and unassailable. I'm talking about the pastors, the men in general, but actually more so with the men in my own family. Grandfathers, great-grandfathers, great-great-grandfathers, people I'd never met, about whom books were written or who had written books themselves, these brave missionaries and pastors who had kind of risked everything and conquered all adversity in the name of God. And because I'd never met any of those ancestors, because they all had died before I was born, and because my own dad seemed to kind of, I won't quite say worship his own ancestry, but kind of, these people sort of grew in my imagination to almost mythological proportions. They seemed like invulnerable, especially anointed by God, or else chosen by the universe to sort of wield magical powers. In my tiny little bubble, they became like almost fused with fictional characters, with like a Superman, or Luke Skywalker, or the Lone Ranger, or like Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock put together. I don't know. In early childhood, I probably propped myself up to some extent with proximity to them, with the strength that I perceived in them. But I also did not relate to them at all. I had no hope whatsoever of emulating them. As far as I could tell, they had nothing to do with me, and that gulf kind of grew as I got older, because unlike those models I had in my church and my family, I was walking around feeling everything. I felt completely exposed, and it was sort of more than I could handle. But it was also more than the people in my life could handle. I think, I grew up in a family that sort of treated feelings as unreasonable and too big and inconvenient or selfish. So by the time I finished elementary school, I was struggling a lot. And by 7th grade, I was at sea. School was becoming super difficult for me. I wasn't getting anything done. I wasn't learning anything. Somewhere in there, I was diagnosed with ADHD, but nobody in my life had tools, I think, to do much with that. So it just sort of became another thing that was wrong with me. Before long, I was just like drowning in shame and self-loathing, and just profoundly lonely. By age 12, I was drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, engaging in other self-harming behaviors as a way of coping and taking control of kind of my unruly emotions. And it went on that way for a long time. I felt, worthless and detestable. And for years, I sought out relationships and behaviors and circumstances that gave me evidence to confirm my own self-hatred. And truth be told, I wish I could say that's completely gone and done, but I still grapple with crippling shame at times, still sorting out my own relationship with it and learning to have compassion for that part of myself. But I will say there have been many of these super important moments along the way, Holy Spirit, turning point kind of moments along the way that have helped to shift my relationship. And I want to talk about one. I think I forgot to ask how much time I actually have to talk about. Okay.
Plenty of time.
Okay.
Another half an hour.
Okay, well, I won't do that. When I was 17, I had the chance to go with my family to Vanuatu, which is an archipelago in the South Pacific, which is where my father was actually born and raised, where several generations of my family had served as missionaries. It was the summer before my senior year in high school, and it had been a long ride for all of us at that point. And somewhere, that trip was super fascinating for me. I think I've talked about it in other contexts. Part of what was so profound about it was I was meeting people for the first time who knew my grandfather, who I had never known. I had this one exchange with a chief in this place called Magum on this tiny little island, Ambram, who wept when he saw me because he thought I was him for a moment. And it's just not having ever felt like I had connection to him, it was this very profound experience. But one of the most important moments for me on that whole trip was we had to drive across this big ash plain, like up in the middle of the island to get from one place to the other. And we didn't have enough space in the vehicle. And my father and I ended up in the back of the pickup truck together, on this long ride. And we're all covered with soot, like as we're going, like the ash is just like, stirring up everywhere. So we're all like, we look like two coal miners sitting in the back of this truck. And somehow, I don't remember how exactly, but somehow we started talking. And somehow my dad started telling me kind of about all of his insecurities. He started telling me about how he had intended to go to seminary, and he started in this program to go to seminary, and ultimately sort of decided he wasn't good enough for it. Just started talking about like in a way that he so just as background, I've never at this point seen this man cry. I've never at this moment seen this man express like any emotion beside anger. I've never heard him tell anything really about himself and his own life or feelings. And here he is like sort of pouring his heart out all of a sudden. And then he starts telling me about his dad too, who was like, his dad was the outgoing moderator of the Church of Vanuatu when that church gained its independence, and had translated like the Bislama language, had created the first like written lexicon of that language, had done he's this like very accomplished, very smart, evidently person who I didn't know, but I've told you how I regarded them. And then he's telling me about, after his dad's death, reading his dad's journal and just seeing like all through this thing, just all the doubts that he had, all the things that he was grappling with and wrestling with, and I remember my dad, sorry that we choked up, but this is what I do, I guess. But my dad talked about, he's reading through his dad's journal after his death, and he turns one page, and both pages are filled just with the words, "I am a failure." Just like as big as you could write across 2 pages. And my dad's doing this as he's telling me about this. Something opened in me, in that moment. I think like it was a while, it's in some ways that moment, as you can see, is like still active in me, still unfolding in me. But I think that the first and most important thing that it did was it made me feel not alone. It made me feel like it sort of put into context all the stuff that I've been wrestling with and that I've been feeling all along the way, which I think I felt like I was probably the only person ever to feel those things and to think those things and to like have those experiences in a way until my dad shared his own. So I think, so I was obviously like also deeply, deeply moved by that. So I guess what I'm grappling with is God doesn't want, I don't think, for me or for us to become like immovable men or people. The gospel sort of can help us to become grounded, but also responsive, courageous people. There certainly are, I think this moment is making really clear for me, there are things that we should be moved from, and things that we should not be moved from. We should not be moved from affirming human dignity, from our solidarity with our neighbors, from mercy, from telling the truth, from resisting domination and harm. But we really have to become movable when it comes to our own egos and our certainty, I think. our fear, our comfort, our superiority, our defensiveness, our resentments. And I guess, so I guess I just offer to you sort of like where I am, that like stuck place where I am on my own journey of like trying to figure out how to be both someone who is rooted, like that tree by the water, but also can be moved, like a tree. I suppose like we need to be able to move some, or else we snap, right? So I'm gonna turn it back to you. I think, actually, maybe I said I wasn't gonna use the screen, but maybe I will in a moment put up a couple questions just for some discussion. And I'll kind of like read them off now, and then I'll see if I can get them put up in a moment.
Do you have a cable?
I do, I have a dog. Yes, I should.
Great.
So I'm just going to invite you to think about what you have been taught about strength, what strength is, when perhaps you have mistaken numbness for stability or strength, what sorts of things actually keep you grounded, what causes you to shut down or harden, where you might be feeling called to stand firm in this moment, where God might be trying to move you, and maybe who has modeled these things for you. I'll put them up on the screen in a moment. I know that's a lot, but let the conversation be free, and then you'll have a prompt in a moment if you need it. Good?
Okay, we're going to finish off this morning. Some group discussion, please. The way we'll organize it is, come on, guys. We're going to organize this by you guys asking questions to Drew and let him respond and have a group discussion. So the first thing is, does anyone want to share or ask a question of Drew?
Can you put the questions back?
Yes, sorry. I will.
Okay. Stand up so we can hear yours.
I'll go ahead and share. Our group, I got started as a talker, as you all know, salesman. I started talking about failure because Drew struck a note with me about his grandfather with the journal and opening the page up and seeing I'm a failure. 2 pages. I could fill the entire journal with pages like that. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's funny, but I'm not kidding. And the other thing he brought up was no man is, I'm going to paraphrase, no man is an island. Because for years, I carried around failures, or at least things that I thought were failures. And I thought, no one else has this book of failures, or no one else has this page of failures. No one else in the entire world. And that's a lie. That's a lie based upon the fact I got brought up with never fail, and then never admit your failures. No, you don't want to give anybody a chance to tear you down with your own failures. You want to be vulnerable with somebody else and let them know that you're suffering or you're struggling with something that you feel is a failure in your life. So yeah, that's kind of what we talked a little bit about too, is failures, and just the fact that I have a tendency to hold them in and think it's only me. I'm the only one in the whole world that has been this bad or done these terrible things.
You know what fail stands for? First attempt in learning.
Very good. You know, we talked about Thomas Edison with 90-something opportunities to make a light bulb, he failed at those. Well, and then the 99th or whatever it was, he made it, so. he failed at-
No stands for next opportunity.
Teacher, that's a teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Did you say this, we could ask questions?
Sure, please.
Yeah, that's just questions, a quick remark that proud isn't quite the word, but it means a lot to me that, I'm a member of a church where the pastor put himself on the front lines in Minnesota earlier this year. And I figure, I know, even from afar, it feels intense, even on the TV, but for you, what's it like being there and now having to in some way or another come down to it, but still, there must be some part of you that's still there, that experience, at this point in time, months later, let's say.
Okay.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is part of why I think wanted to talk about this subject today, is that in the case of Minnesota, like I felt a call went out from organizers and clergy there, and I had heard other calls before. I had sometimes thought I should go and didn't. And when this one came, I just felt like I had to. I felt like I really needed to go. And it was really intense being there. And I was there for, I was there for 2 full days. I was there for essentially, 60 hours or something. And it turned out to be the day before Alex Preddy was killed, and I was like at that intersection the day before he was killed. It was very intense. The thing that and so on the one hand, I think I came back and I was like, on the one hand, I was really motivated to like continue this work, and to dig into this work more deeply and to commit more truly, and to, felt called in that way. And I also, like my own capacity, I have felt, this is partly about me and partly about the moment we're living in, but I have felt my own capacity like crash, completely. And then other times where I'm like overworking and like showing up at all the things everywhere, and I'm still working in my 40s to try to not let the pendulum swing quite so far in either direction. But I felt really, at once like really stirred, really moved, and also like debilitated and immobilized. And then I think about the people for whom this is like their reality every day, no matter, certainly, for the protesters and others in Minnesota, but especially like for many of our immigrant siblings, like who are just like living in terror, day in and day out, whether you choose it or not. There's no option to like, I'm gonna sit this one out, because you're just sort of living it. And I think, all I can say is I think like we are all gonna be healing for years to come, after this past year. And of course, it's not as though all the harm that's ever happened has happened in this last year. There's a lot of harm, that's gone on for a long time. But I don't know if I'm answering your question at all. But I think that it's, we keep asking this. I hear myself asking, and so many of you asking, like, what can we do? What can we do? And I think we often feel really stuck, because we feel both things. We feel the like being immobilized in not the tree by the waterway, and also like feeling a call, feeling something inside of us that says like, oh, I do need to do something. I do need to respond in some way. And I don't know. I can't resolve it, but I'm in the tension.
Anything else? Oh, come on. Okay, David, would you stand up and tell us about David and Jonathan? Because after he says this, I want you to ask the question of yourselves, how many of us have a Jonathan? And how many of us are Jonathans for others? David?
Amen.
How do you expect me to improvise what I'm called on?
I expect you to do that. Yes, this is your role.
I warmed up a month ago, so, but anyway, Drew, you inspired me while you were talking. I was thinking about two guys, and I'll add the third one, David, but I was thinking about Moses, you know, like the greatest leader forever. And yet when God said, I want you to do this, he said, I can't do it. I can't do this, God. I just don't have the ability. And God said, I'm going to give you a partner, Aaron. And he's going to go with you. And so it's like the David story too. My first talk here at this group when we restarted a couple years ago was every David needs a Jonathan. And I just think, you know, as I was coming up, it was having friends. It was having brothers who I would, when I was at Berkeley, you know, I graduated 58 years ago. So in my freshman year, the whole campus exploded with a free speech movement, and it was all chaos. My whole, you know, my whole education or undergraduate days at Berkeley. And what made me, how could I continue to be a Christian? How could I continue to compete, you might say, as a student? It was friends. We encouraged each other. And eventually, when I was old enough, we'd go to Straw Hat, have a beer, or Larry Blake's, and talk about things. So it's that brotherhood thing that I reached out and got my Jonathan around me, or my Aaron. And I was also thinking about Jeremiah, because he had the same response. Lord, I can't do this. I can't speak. And God said, look, I'm going to give you the words to speak. You don't need to invent all this stuff. I'm going to give you something to speak. And so I think we need brothers and sisters for that matter, but we also need to deepen our roots in Scripture, in the Word of God. I will give you something to speak. And the more we, with our brothers and by ourselves, deepen our roots in Scripture, we have a kind of power, a kind of insight that we can bring to Minnesota. We can bring to San Francisco. We can bring to the house where we live. That's what my short speech.
David reminded me that David, in Scripture, had sexual desires for Bathsheba, if you remember. How many of you have Jonathans that you can take that level to? And that's what I mean by having Jonathans. So we should be about that work.
Yes, I just would say one more thing about Bathsheba. I've often pointed out, Jonathan was killed in battle. And so when David is looking out on the roof and he sees this beautiful woman, he should have called Jonathan. But he didn't have Jonathan. He didn't have a Jonathan. But when we feel temptation like that, or when we feel vulnerability and failure and everything else, we need to call somebody and have a brother we can call. And David should have called his Jonathan and said, Jonathan, I'm about to screw up because I want this woman so bad. But he didn't have a Jonathan to call, it seems like, and so he just failed that way.
Ben?
My Jonathan came to me through my uncle, my mom's older brother, who, and his son, Don. Donald was killed in the Battle of the Bulge midway in January of 45. He was a tank, in a tank battalion, caught in the middle of a surge between the Nazi Panther tanks. He didn't come home, but I know where he's buried, in San Diego. I visit him and all my relatives down there whenever I get that far south. And I haven't been back to Mexico, where I did an awful lot of work when I worked for the Tijuana Water District, I call it. It's the Otay Water District, right on the border. And it was a place where I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what people didn't have. They didn't have any water. The Martinez Reservoir was a mud pit, and we built a pipeline down there to put water in it and give them a reliable water supply. So I've enjoyed the ride. It's been 83 years, so I still got a new cane and everything. So it's all good. My wife does all the driving. Keep me out of trouble. We still stop in to our old stomping grounds with friends.
So Don, do you have a new David?
Actually, it's a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
They're old.
They're old.
Think fire.
There are 3 boys in my family, and those are the guys that went in the fire for us.
Thank you.
But they walked out.
Yeah. Drew, do you have any summary words?
I do, on some notes that I. So actually, I guess, I may just conclude by saying, it was an interesting direction that we took at the end there, and I do think it's really important to lift up not becoming isolated in this tension. I think maybe that's a temptation for men in particular in our culture. I know it is for me, and I think it's really, whether it's a Jonathan or someone else or someone's else, I think it's really important that we have each other in this. The goal, of course, I don't think God's goal for us is that we become unfeeling, immovable in that sense, but to become, as you say, deeply rooted people who can bend without breaking. And I thought we might finish by singing again, if that's okay. And even if it's not, let's do it anyway. Can I invite you to stand with me one more time? So holding in mind perhaps the ways in which we can allow ourselves to be moved by God, but also knowing the places where we can and are called to together hold our ground. Let's sing again. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the waters. Oh, we shall not be moved. Thanks, y'all.